Hey guys, so it's day 3 of our unexpected second lockdown. The first one was a quarantine, and this one is a countrywide lockdown for 3 weeks during the high holidays like Sukkot and Rosh Hashanah and beyond. The last week we had before lockdown began, I went and saw as much as I could see. I literally was every day up from like 7 a.m. Here's a little snippet of my last week running around like a banshee. I actually don't know if banshees run. I'm realizing now that doesn't even make sense. Running around like a person about to go into lockdown. So how long of a tunnel is this?
It's not very long.
Hey everyone, so I'm here in our wonderful JUC library, got my mint tea, ready to talk about some theology, and the concept I have been pondering this week is that of graven images, particularly the command to not have graven images that's found in Exodus 24. And I've been thinking about that, particularly because it's come up in different forms in 2 of my classes, which I want to share some info on in this video. And you know, it's an interesting question because it's one thing to just read that at face value and be like, okay, it means you can't have anything that's graven, nothing that represents animals, people, gods, nothing. But when you actually look at the history of the Israelites, if you look at Christian history, we obviously have graven images. In my History of the Church in the East class, we're learning about icons and the very important role that icons play in Eastern Orthodox Christianity. Coming from the Protestant tradition, I really didn't have a great grasp on the importance of icons and the greater meaning that is just wrapped in all of the different colors and images and symbols until I started taking this class and realized that icons for many Eastern Orthodox people are this window into the heavenly realm, and it's this way to reflect on the glory of God and to glorify God. And they would not say that they're worshiping the icons. They would say that the icons are bringing their gaze, bringing their hearts, turning them to God. And so we have a ton of icons in the Eastern Church. I know that icons were a big part of the Reformation and the split between the Catholic and the Protestant Church. Even within the Protestant tradition, we still have crosses, we still have images. What constitutes a graven image? You know, within Christianity, that's a great question, I think, to think about. And then going further back to the Old Testament and to the life of the Israelites, they have this commandment that says, do not have any graven images, but you don't have to go further than Solomon's temple, the Ark of the Covenant with the cherubim. Solomon's temple was decorated with palm trees and other images. There was even this large basin that was sitting on the backs of 12 oxen. Yeah, look at it. I mean, those are images if I ever saw them. And so I'm not trying to prove this verse wrong or anything. I'm just genuinely curious as to how we could get perhaps a step closer to the verse's original meaning, or at least look at different ways this verse could be interpreted, since clearly there are images throughout Israelite history, throughout Christian history, and I learned something very interesting in my Ancient Egypt in the Bible class from my professor and the president of JUC, Dr. Paul Wright. I have included a link in the description box below to his bio if you'd like to read more about him. And so in class, we're learning about Egypt, culture, language, history, as you do in an Ancient Egypt class. And so he was teaching us about hieroglyphics. And I hadn't realized before that hieroglyphics are one script, they're one form that the Egyptian language could be written in. So they don't speak Egyptian in Egypt anymore. Most people there speak Arabic, but back in the day, Egyptian could be written through hieroglyphics, which were carved images. Check out this picture. Yeah, like this. These are some beautiful examples of hieroglyphics. And they weren't written with punctuation or spaces. It's just image after image after image. Normally, it's a lot of animals involved in these images, some people, nature, sun, rain, things like that. And so this form of writing the Egyptian language was developing around 3200 BC, the same time as cuneiform, which is a script of the Akkadian language, one way to write the Akkadian language. And hieroglyphics in Greek translates to priestly carvings, which makes sense because the hieroglyphics were reserved for matters of religious significance. They were put on temples, they were put in tombs because burial practice, how people were buried, was a very religious event in ancient Egypt. It determined how you were going to enter the afterlife and all of that great stuff. And what's even more interesting is that while it means priestly carvings in Greek, in Egyptian, it better translates to the words of the gods. This is how hieroglyphics were viewed. They were the literal words of the gods. And so that's why they had to be carved out very carefully with great detail. They also always had to be carved into stone because whatever's put into stone was seen as eternal. And the words of the gods are eternal. And after explaining all of this, Dr. Wright brought us to the very verse I have been pondering, Exodus 24. And he asked, what if this commandment to not make graven images is less about, not making things that look like pomegranates or animals or things like that, but more about where they were coming from and leaving this world of graven images, this world that was dictated by literal graven images behind. In Egypt, they would have been surrounded by hieroglyphics, the words of the gods that dictate the spiritual reality, where they go after life, the incantations they have to say, the gods that, the words come from. It would have been just enmeshed in the culture of Egypt. And Dr. Wright was saying, what if this commandment is calling the Israelites into something new? And God is saying that way of life, that culture, those graven images and everything that surrounded that is no longer your way of life. I am making you into something entirely new. And so you can't have graven images. You can't follow the words of those gods. And you can't live into the cultural, religious, societal reality of Egypt anymore, which, as we know through stories we find in the Old Testament, would have been a challenge for the Israelites. The land, the way of the Egyptians was an enticing one. Egypt was the superpower of the ancient world. Not only did they have fertile land and great resources, but they were just a powerful group of people. And I think it's hard, most of us would agree that it's hard to go against the grain of culture, to go against everything that you've been surrounded by for so long, and to live into a completely different way of life, not to mention a lot more difficult way of life as the Israelites prepare to head out into the wilderness and live in much more hazardous, unknown terrain. Also, side note, I know that it's, I think, common in the academic world to call the Israelites Hebrews, especially before Mount Sinai. It's like they don't become the people of Israel, the Israelites, until after that. But I had learned last semester in one of my classes, also with Dr. Wright, that Hebrews would have been most likely a foreign term that was attached to the Israelites. Something that the Egyptians called them. That is why I sometimes refer to them as Israelites rather than Hebrews when they are still in Egypt. And so anyways, I just thought this was a fascinating way to look at the commandment, particularly because I think this emphasis on hieroglyphics as the graven images actually broadens how we can view this commandment rather than narrow it. I think that when you just read it, on its own, don't make any graven images, just don't do it. I think it has the potential of becoming something we interpret legalistically or we just don't get, so we just kind of just leave it there and we have our images and we don't really know what to do with that. But when when Dr. I added this hieroglyphic component to the conversation, I realized that this commandment could be combating the power of a culture that is enticing and powerful. And we know from the stories that the Israelites are going to complain. They're going to miss Egypt. They're going to want to go back to Egypt. And so we realize, at least I think I've realized the importance of a verse like this, where God is letting them know, hey, this is a new chapter. I'm doing something new with you. And even when you're tempted, even when you want to go back to the hieroglyphics, the graven images, and everything it represents, don't. Keep going forward. Keep going into the new story that I'm writing with you and through you and about you. And I just think there's so much there that more easily relates to our situation in the modern world, because I don't know about you, but I don't find myself walking by like golden calves or idols and having to like resist temptation to like bow to a little idol that's sitting on, you know, some shelf. Idols and graven images look different, have different meaning and significance and power in today's modern world. But when I look at the commandment this way and what it might mean when it comes to leaving behind just everything, the entire system, I think there's a lot more there that could relate to where we are. So those are just a few thoughts, some things I've been thinking about and wrestling through. But what I really would like to do is extend that question to you and ask, what do you think? What do you think about this verse and graven images? What does it mean to you? How do you interpret it? What do you think counts as a graven image or not? What does it mean for where we're at in the modern world? That's something I'm still thinking about and would love to hear your comments in the comment section below if you have thoughts on this. So that's it for this week. I hope you're having a wonderful, thought-provoking day wherever you are. And as always, I'll see you next time.